July 2026, Tehran. Millions fill the streets for the marathon funeral of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the man who ruled Iran for 37 years, killed by American and Israeli bombs 4 months earlier. Delegations arrive from Russia, China, Pakistan, even Saudi Arabia. Iran's oldest rival sends a tribute that sparks its own immediate controversy. But look closer at this funeral. Someone is missing. The dead man's son, the new supreme leader of Iran, Mojtaba Khamenei, did not stand at his own father's coffin. Think about what that means. In a country built entirely on religious ritual, at the most important funeral in a generation, the one man whose ultimate duty it was to stand before the nation and pray over that grave, never appeared, while 3 of Khamenei's other sons stood in the front row weeping over the caskets. The new supreme leader was completely absent from view. Officially, the regime claims his absence is a strict security protocol, but behind the scenes, a much darker reality is leaking out. Reports from the ground reveal that Mojtaba Khamenei's inner circle admits the new leader was heavily disfigured in the very same February airstrike that took his father's life. He's physically broken, hidden away, and still recovering from the blast. But whether he's a hunted man too physically shattered to step into the daylight, or a leader being strictly handled by his own protectors, that single empty space at the Grand Mosque tells you everything. Because here's what nobody says out loud: Iran has a new supreme leader, but the man with the title may not be the man with the power. Just like in North Korea, just like in Beijing, the real ruler is the one you're not allowed to see. So who actually rules Iran today? To answer that, we need to go back to where the Ayatollah's empire began, because the way it was built is exactly the way it's now coming apart. To understand the empty space at the funeral, you have to go back to 1979, to an old man on an Air France flight, returning from 14 years of exile to a country in flames. Ayatollah Khamenei had spent those years as a voice without a face, his sermons smuggled into Iran on cassette tapes, copied hand to hand, played in mosques and bazaars until millions knew his words by heart. By the time the Shah fled, Khamenei didn't need to seize power. The crowd handed it to him. But he didn't just overthrow a king. He invented something no modern state had ever tried. Velayat-e Faqih, guardianship of the jurist. The idea that above the president, above the parliament, above the army, there should sit one cleric with the final word on everything. A man answerable to no voters, but to God. Within a year, Iranians voted in a referendum with exactly one question: Islamic Republic, yes or no? What they got was a state with 2 skeletons, a visible one, elections, ministers, a parliament, the one that appears on television and signs treaties, and a hidden one, the supreme leader's office, the Revolutionary Guard, unelected councils with the power to veto any law and disqualify any candidate. Foreign powers spent decades negotiating with the visible skeleton. The hidden one held the power. That was a trick. That was always a trick. And in 1989, when Khamenei died, the system faced its first test. Could it survive its creator? It almost didn't. Khamenei's chosen successor, Ayatollah Montazeri, had been cast out just months before the founder's death for the crime of criticizing mass executions. The revolution devoured its own heir. So when Khamenei died, the men in the room needed a replacement overnight. They passed over every grand Ayatollah in the country and chose Ali Khamenei, a mid-ranking cleric who, by the Constitution's own rules, wasn't even qualified. So they changed the Constitution. In a matter of weeks, the religious bar of God's representative on earth was simply lowered. Rivals dismissed him as a placeholder. The placeholder ruled for 37 years. Here's a paradox that defines modern Iran. Precisely because Khamenei lacked top-tier religious authority, he built worldly power instead. He constructed a shadow government inside his own office. Thousands of officials, commissaries embedded in every ministry, every army unit, every broadcaster. He turned the Revolutionary Guard into an economic empire. Ports, telecoms, construction, oil. He controlled business conglomerates worth tens of billions of dollars, built partly from confiscated property, answerable to no parliament, audited by no one. He survived the 2009 Green Movement, the 2019 fuel protests, the 2022 uprising after Mahsa Amini's death. Each time, the visible state bent, the hidden state crushed. But there was one problem Khamenei could never solve, because it was him: succession. Name an heir too early and you create a rival. Name no one and the system dies with you. So he did it in shadow, a son with no official title, no public speeches, no photographs at state events, who quietly controlled access to his father's office for 2 decades. A cleric who never finished the religious rank the Constitution demands, but who helped direct the crackdown machinery when the streets rose in 2009. The men of the deep state didn't call Mojtaba Khamenei prince. They didn't have to. Everyone in Tehran knew. No one in Tehran said it. February 28, 2026, 9:40 in the morning. It took 60 seconds to decapitate the Islamic Republic. For years, foreign intelligence had been quietly living inside Iran's infrastructure, hacked traffic cameras tracking convoys through Tehran, compromised phone networks, satellites watching a fortified compound the outside world wasn't supposed to know existed. When the strike came, it came through a corridor cleared in Iran's own air defenses. The man who survived assassination plots for 4 decades, who never announced his movements, who trusted almost no one, was found, tracked, and killed in his secret compound. Iran answered with missiles. The region held its breath. Oil markets convulsed. Tankers rerouted. And for a few days, the world genuinely did not know whether it was watching the start of a much larger war. And then something strange happened. Within days, with missiles still flying, the Assembly of Experts elected a new supreme leader. The son, the man with no office, no rank worthy of the title, no public record. The succession Khamenei could never announce in life was executed over his body in wartime. Officially, unity, continuity, divine order. Unofficially, Purges, a legendary Quds Force commander, dead amid whispers that he was a traitor who sold out the supreme leader's location. Officials vanishing from public life. Analysts counting how many of Iran's top commanders were still alive and using phrases like running out of leaders. And the new ruler himself. Silence. For 3 months, the supreme leader of 89 million people was a name without a face. His first confirmed public appearance came only in June. Brief, controlled, and gone again. Days later, he was forced to answer for something his father would never have accepted: a peace deal with Washington. The system built to outlive any single man had survived, but it had survived the way a wounded animal survives: by hiding. Which brings us back to July 3rd and a funeral held 4 months after the death. 4 months. Iran had to preserve its leader's body through a war before it could bury him, a practice so alien to Islamic burial law that the preservation itself became a theological controversy. The revolution that claimed to speak for God spent its summer explaining why God's representative wasn't yet in the ground. When the funeral finally came, it was staged as a show of strength. Foreign leaders, vast crowds, talk of carrying the coffin onward to the holy city of Karbala. Even the Saudi delegation's choice of Quranic verse became a diplomatic incident, because at this funeral, every gesture was a message. But the new supreme leader watched it, if he watched it at all, from an undisclosed location. Sit with that for a moment. Either Iran's supreme leader is a hunted, physically broken man who cannot stand at his own father's grave, or he is a man whose own Praetorian Guard now decides where he goes, what he leads, and when the world is allowed to see him. Both possibilities point to the same conclusion. The second skeleton, the hidden state, is no longer serving the Ayatollah. It may be replacing him. So what happens to Iran now? Follow the evidence, and 3 futures emerge. Future 1. The Hermit Kingdom of the Middle East. Mojtaba consolidates power the way he always operated, invisibly. He rules through his father's networks, appears once or twice a year in carefully staged footage, and turns his absence into an ideology. The leader is everywhere, so he needs to be seen nowhere. Iran leans harder on China and Russia, races to finish its nuclear insurance policy, and seals its information borders. It's a North Korean model, a family inheriting a revolution, and a state where invisibility is not weakness, but doctrine. Future 2. The General's Republic. The clerical layer fades into ritual, and the Revolutionary Guard, which already controls the economy, the missiles, and now apparently the supreme leader's own movements, becomes a true regime, a military state wearing a turban. In this future, the man who skipped the funeral isn't a hermit king, he's a hostage with a title. And there's one signal to watch: the negotiations with Washington. The frozen billions Iran is demanding back. The peace deal Mojtaba has already been forced to bless. His father spent 37 years saying America could never be trusted, and the deal is moving anyway. If the guards sign over its clerical objections, you'll know exactly who rules Iran. Future 3. The Third Revolution. Wars lost, commanders dead, succession disputed, an economy strangled by sanctions, and an exhausted population that has already risen up 3 times in 20 years and remembers who fired the bullets. Advisors to the exiled crown prince openly call this the regime's final endgame. It sounds like wishful thinking, until you remember that in 1977, an American president stood in Tehran and toasted the Shah's Iran as an island of stability. 14 months later, the Shah was gone. Regimes look immortal right up until the moment they aren't. In this future, Khamenei's funeral wasn't a show of strength, it was a rehearsal. Which future wins? Here's the uncomfortable truth. The Islamic Republic began with a funeral, Khamenei's, in 1989, when a frenzied crowd tore the shroud from his body, and the state nearly lost control of its own founder's burial. 37 years later, it may be ending with one: a preserved body, a scripted crowd, and an heir, and an heir, and an heir who couldn't come. The Ayatollahs built a system designed to outlive any man. They never asked whether it could outlive their family. One more thing, this is the third time we've found the same pattern. The person with the title is not the person with the power. In North Korea, the real leader might be the dictator's sister. In China, the most powerful woman in the country was silenced for it. And now in Iran, a supreme leader who can't even attend his own father's funeral. If you want to see how this pattern works when it's perfected, watch the North Korea story next. So tell me in the comments, who really rules Iran today? The invisible son, or the generals who hide him? And subscribe, because on Ghost Reality, we find the people who really hold the power, the ones you're not supposed to see.